Welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper and this week's episode of Crime and Coloring, where we take an alphabetical journey through the United States and revisit some of the earliest crimes. Before we talk crime, let's talk coloring. I purchased two Stampin' Bella stamp sets that I think are adorable, a gnome and a dinosaur set, and dinosaurs got the popular vote to be colored for our video today, so I will be coloring these super cute dinosaurs. I'm going to try to color them in the same color palette as is listed on the stamp packaging. I will be stamping with Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink on a piece of Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock, and I will be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm using my Misty Stamp Positioner. I do need to take the black foam pad out because this is a rubber-mounted stamp. So I am going to only stamp this stamp one time, even though it's new and I haven't used it before, because when I am done coloring, I will stamp over it again because there are some pretty bold eyeballs on these dinosaurs and I want them to be nice and intensely black. One thing to note during the coloring, the color combination that I picked for the green, I did not love, so I switched that out. And something new, at the end of the video, I'm going to go ahead and turn this colored image into a super quick card. So, now that we've discussed the things about the coloring that I think I remember that are important, let's jump into our crime. Our alphabetical journey this week takes us to the state of New Jersey. On November 20th, 1789, New Jersey became the first state to ratify the new Bill of Rights. And then on December 18th, 1787, New Jersey became the third state to ratify the new U.S. Constitution, thereby joining the Union following Delaware and Pennsylvania. One thing to note is that New Jersey and New York were at multiple times one colony, one part of the colony, and they have, anyway, by the time that New Jersey became the third state, they were permanently separated into separate entities. New Jersey played a major role in crafting the structure of the U.S. government after it became widely evident that the original Articles of Confederation were ill-suited to govern a unified nation. The original Articles of Confederation did not really address the issue of states having conflicting laws. As the 19th century dawned, New Jersey grew and prospered. New factories sprung up throughout the state. The city of Paterson became a textile center and later became known for producing trains and silk. Trenton produced clay products, iron and steel. Camden, Elizabeth, New Jersey, Newark, and Passaic became major manufacturing centers. And then as the century progressed, an increasingly urbanized New Jersey became known as the Garden State, which is kind of funny since they are the factory state, but that's okay. New Jersey has the highest density population of any state in the United States. More cars are stolen in the city of Newark than any other city in the United States. Beamerville, New Jersey is home to a volcano that is no longer active, but it is a popular site for real estate development. The first ever baseball game was played in Hoboken. New Jersey is home to more diners than any other state. During the Revolutionary War, more battles were fought in New Jersey than any other state. Camden, New Jersey was the site of the very first drive-in movie theater. Cheerleading started in Princeton in 1869, but square dancing is the state's dance of New Jersey. And New Jersey is where a woman was actually chloroformed to death. Now, I spent an unusually a large amount of time and got very grumpy researching this story because there's not a lot of information. And I felt like there should be more information on this because our story takes place in the mid-1800s. And it was a well-known story, But the early lives and the childhood of our cast of characters was hard to find information on. So, here we go. Arthur Stanley Niffin or Kiffin, I can't decide which, it's K-N-I-F-F-I-N, I'm going to call him Niffin, was born in November of 1856. No day given. In Sullivan, New York, in the United States, to his father, William, and his mother, Jessie. His father was 28, his mother was 30, and he was the second child and the first son. He apparently attended medical and or dental school somewhere that I cannot find. And in fact, other than listing his month and year of birth and finding his parents and his sister, I found nothing else about him until he got married. Myra Murphy was even more of a mystery. Her birth is listed as December 9th, 1856 or 1857. There's two conflicting records. And her birth is listed as the United States. That's all, just the United States. Comes from a census. So, yeah. Her father was James Murphy, and her mother was Mary Ann Murphy. Her father was 31, and her mother was 26 when she was born. She was the oldest of their 3 children. And surprise, surprise, again, very little information on her childhood or young adult life until her marriage. So, Arthur and Myra were married on the 23rd of April, 1878. And then on October 29th of 1879, Myra gave birth to their only son, Arthur Leland. Arthur and Myra were then living in Trenton, New Jersey, where Arthur was practicing as a doctor. I said doctor or dental or medical school because of details that come into play later. But it appears he was practicing as both, so it was probably normal at the time for a medical doctor to also be involved in dental work. Myra's cousin Emma was currently living with them in Trenton, and she had been working as a typist for the Empire Rubber Works. Another thing to note is that Arthur's birthplace is listed as New York, but in some sources say he was a lifelong resident of Trenton, but I couldn't find his parents having ever lived there. So, our story does take place in Trenton, New Jersey. On the night of November 30th, 1889-ish, Arthur was away from home, and while he was gone, and it doesn't say where he went, 3 burglars climbed a ladder and broke into the house through a 3rd-story window. They entered the room where Emma and Myra were sleeping, and while one man held Emma, the cousin, in bed at knife point, the other 2 went through the house, opening drawers, examining jewelry. They left with $16 in cash and nothing else. It is safe to assume, although that's not what you're supposed to do, but probably they broke into the home because the doctor's office would have operated in the home as well. There would have been a separate office as part of the home. Interesting, though, Myra had been sleeping in the same bed as Emma, and she managed to sleep through the entire incident. So the burglars reportedly held Emma, the cousin, at knife point, and Myra never woke up. The police were notified and an investigation began, but after several days with no clues, they basically gave up investigating the case. It was entered into the books as mysterious, and even though very little was taken, the Myra and Arthur's 10-year-old son, Lenny, as he was called, was traumatized by this, and he actually began sleeping at his grandmother's house. Myra's mother, Mrs. James Murphy, is what I'm going to call her Mrs. Murphy. On January 2nd of 1890, Arthur had planned to be away from home again, and Myra's mother asked her if she wanted to come stay at their place with Lenny, who was still some month and a half, 2 months later, still sleeping at his grandmother's house. So it appears that Myra's parents lived there in Trenton or very, very close by. Myra declined to sleep at her mother's home, saying that she was not afraid and that she even kept a 7-shot revolver loaded and under her pillow now. So early on the morning of January 2nd, 1890, Arthur left to catch a train to the town of Broadway, New Jersey. Reportedly, he was looking at a piece of property he was planning to buy. Broadway, New Jersey was also the home of Emma, Myra's cousin. And when Arthur arrived at the train depot in Broadway, he saw Emma boarding her return train to Trenton. She had been visiting her family for the holidays and was now reportedly returning to Trenton on the afternoon train. So the following morning, so this would be January 3rd, Arthur's partner, Dr. William Shannon, arrived at the house at 7:30 to open the doctor's office. William found the furniture in the home in disarray, burned matches on the floor, and other evidence of a burglary. So this would be the second burglary since November. He called for Myra, and she did not respond, so he ran through the house and up to her bedroom. And when he entered the bedroom, he found Myra lying in bed and Emma lying on the floor. Now, this is one of those wonky things that I noticed in this story was that according to Arthur, he saw Emma on the morning of the 2nd. And so now on the morning of the 3rd, so Emma must have gotten home, but Arthur himself had not. So it's one of those details that was kind of a little bit suspicious. Let's just call it that. Okay. Anyways, Dr. William thought both women were dead, and he ran down the stairs calling for help. When he returned to the home with 2 men from the local drugstore, he found that Emma was partly conscious, and when he touched her, she started screaming, "Oh, the burglars! Run, Myra, run!" However, Myra was dead. A corner of a quilt had been saturated with chloroform and held over her face, and so much chloroform was used that the odor lingered in the room. Now, I've never personally sniffed chloroform because, the whole unconscious side effect thing. But it seems to me that Dr. William would have been familiar with that smell. And if it was lingering in the room, that must mean a lot of chloroform was used. So, later that afternoon, when Emma was sufficiently revived, I'm using air quotes like you can see me quoting this revived, to make a statement, she said she was not unconscious when they found her on the floor, but felt as though she was paralyzed and unable to move her hands and her feet. She and Myra, Emma told the police, had gone to bed at the same time. Both were cheerful, and they stayed awake talking for some time, and then she nodded off. She couldn't say how long she slept, but was awakened by a touch from Myra, who screamed that there was a burglar pushing open the door. Emma heard the noise and sprang out of bed, and running to the front window, called loudly for help. She said that one of the burglars seized her, threw her on the floor, and pressed a wet cloth over her face, and that was all she remembered. Reportedly, when she was told that Myra was actually dead, Emma became hysterical. Arthur was summoned home by telegraph, but he was not told about his wife's death until he arrived home at 8:30 that night. He was taken to police headquarters and extensively questioned about his movements on the previous day, then brought to his house to determine if anything had been stolen. While the furniture had been disturbed in the dental office, nothing appeared to be missing. The day's receipts were usually kept in a drawer there, but Dr. William had taken the cash home with him the night before for safekeeping. And this is why I said I wasn't sure if he was a doctor or a dentist doctor or if he practiced both, because he talked about the dental office furniture being disheveled. So while relatives of Myra, including her mother, believed the cousin Emma's story of the burglary, the police and the press did not. In a story dated January 3rd, the New York Times put the word robbery in quotes while describing Emma's account. The house had been locked, there was no evidence of a break-in, and nothing was taken. Arthur was known to be a sporting man who would bet $500 or more on a horse race, and that would explain why his house might also have been targeted by burglars, but not why the burglaries always occurred while he was away. To the chagrin of the Niffen family and their friends, the police were doing nothing to investigate the alleged robbery. So, like all little towns, things start happening, and the murder became the talk of the town, and the rumor mills of Trenton were churning out their own opinions of the case. Arthur was a longtime resident of Trenton, prominent and well-known. Many in town had stories about the family, and it was said that relations between Arthur and his wife had deteriorated, and he was known to hit her on occasion. Arthur would often walk cousin Emma home from the rubber works factory where she was working, and the two had been seen, quote, in secluded localities together, conducting themselves as lovers do. So many people believed that the burglary story was a ruse and that Emma had conspired with Arthur to murder his wife. Naturally, there was a coroner's inquest into the cause of Maya's death. And as it began, events outside the courtroom took another sensational turn. Around 3:30 in the morning on January 7th, Arthur attempted suicide. Emma's brother, David, was staying at the house, and he and Arthur had been up until after 1 a.m. to see off other relatives. Arthur told David he wanted to take a bath before bed. Around 3:30, David heard Arthur stumbling to bed and went to see what was wrong. He found Arthur vomiting and realized he had taken a poison. He was also bleeding from his wrist and his throat. David gave him an emetic and ran to get help, the thing that makes you vomit more. He brought back 2 physicians, and Arthur's life was saved. I keep saying his name. I keep tripping over the name Arthur. I don't know what the deal is with that. The family said that Arthur had acted out of grief over the death of his wife, but once again the police and the press were unconvinced. Although he had ingested a large amount of the poison aconite, he would have, as a doctor, known the effect would only be nausea, with the resulting eliminating of the poison, aka vomiting. His wrist had a slight cut, a, quote, feeble attempt to sever the radial artery, and the right side of his neck was, quote, another weak attack on the carotid artery. Both cuts were only deep enough to penetrate the skin. As a doctor, they felt if he had really been intent on suicide, he had plenty of uninterrupted time to do so and the knowledge wherewith to do it correctly is not the right word here, to be successful. Okay. As the inquest proceeded, more than 60 witnesses were scheduled to testify. Arthur and Emma's brother David, cousin David, hired the Pinkertons, the famous detectives, and a local private detective to do what the Trenton police refused to do, which was find the burglars. The people of Trenton were divided in their opinion, though. Mostly were against Arthur. And as the story became national news, the police received letters from around the country expressing opinions on how they should proceed. Why does that not surprise me? Here, I don't know anything about your job or the part of the world where you live, but let me tell you how I think you should conduct your business. Okay, anyway. The inquest into Maya's murder went on until January 28th, with the courtroom filled to capacity every day. Arthur and Emma were considered suspects, and by the end, Dr. William, Arthur's partner, was also considered. But James Murphy, Maya's father, and other members of her family did not believe that anyone in the household or that William were involved. There were some attempts to identify the burglars, but in the end, the jury at the coroner's inquest only came to the conclusion that Myra Kniffen was murdered by the hand of some person unknown to the jury. Now keep in mind, this is a coroner's inquest. This is not a trial. This is what determines whether or not a crime has been committed, and this coroner's inquest would then be presented to the prosecuting attorneys with recommendations. So the jury of the coroner's inquest had their suspicions and recommended that the case be sent to the grand jury. And this was done in February. But to the distress of the Trenton police, the grand jury did not hand down any indictments, meaning they refused to go to trial. With no one indicted, the Trenton police interest in the case was effectively over. The press would have one more go-round. They didn't let it go. They're like a dog with a bone. The following December, so nearly a year after Maya's death, the Washington Critic Record, which is a newspaper, printed an unsubstantiated rumor that Dr. Arthur Kniffen had married Emma Purcell, and that the two were now living together in New Brunswick, New Jersey. When confronted, Arthur accused the newspapers of persecuting him, but did not deny the rumor. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Jennie, why did you pick this story? There's nothing extra sensational about it. There's no point of law that was created by this story, and it is completely unresolved. And you would be right. There was no point of law, as we've seen in some of our other cases. There was nothing super sensational or crazy, like having, the entire town turn out to the funeral of a quote working girl. Check out the other videos. But I chose this story because it intrigued me. So, was Maya the victim of burglars on 2 separate occasions in a 2-month span of time? Which, for the record, I find highly suspicious. Her husband goes out of town twice and her house gets broken into. I don't know. Or was Maya the victim of her cousin and her cheating husband? Which I find slightly more likely. I don't know, call me cynical. I think that probably it is just as likely that all of these burglaries were occurring while her husband was out of town on purpose. So, I don't know. You tell me. Leave me a comment below and tell me what you think. Do you think that A, there's not enough evidence to make a decision, that B, the burglaries and the relationship with her husband and cousin are completely separate, or C, that the husband and the cousin pulled the wool over everybody's eyes and they did it? So here is the finished card. I hope you enjoyed this fun little twist to the end of my crime video. Thank you so much for stopping by. I really do want to hear your comments on this story. I have a couple of other videos here I think that you might enjoy, as well as a subscribe button. If you haven't already, subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you come back for all of my videos. Leave me a thumbs up and have a really super great day.